I'm very pleased to see everybody here, and we are today going to be hearing from Ann Clark. Ann is the research director for the Newton Institute, and they're working on a book. I don't know, The Wisdom of Souls, so she can tell us whether how the book is coming. But she has fascinating things to say about life between lives and about the hypnotherapy method of getting into the life between lives circumstances. And so looking forward to her presentation today. With that, I'll pass it over to Ann.
Great. Well, I'm delighted to be here today. I attended the symposium last year for the first time, and I was absolutely delighted. It was one of the best conferences I've ever been to, and I'm really looking forward to coming back this coming year. I'd like to start out by telling you a little bit about what life between life hypnotherapy is all about, in case you don't know. It's a very deep hypnotic process developed over the period of a number of years that allows you to connect with your soul self and the wise beings that guide you, and also to enter the spiritual realm and learn about why you came here this time to Earth, what you hope to achieve, what you hope to learn, what some of your challenges are. We allow clients to ask up to 25 questions that they may have either of a personal nature or of a more universal nature during the sessions. A typical life between life session will last between 4 to 5 hours. I've had them go longer, 6 plus. It just depends on what's going on. The founder of the Newton Institute was Dr. Michael Newton, and it's just 50 years ago this year that his first client that he was working with hypnotherapy went into the afterlife, and that started him on his journey of developing a process to allow us to get there and how to do it. So that took place over many, many years. As a researcher, I marvel at what Dr. Newton was able to do, because typically when we discover something new, we're all excited and we can't wait to run down the hall and tell our colleagues all about it. But he waited for some 15, 20 years before he put this out. And it's a very good idea that he did, because at that point in time, if he had tried to put this forward as research he was doing, it most likely would have been killed in the crib, because there were so many naysayers at that time who just didn't believe in this kind of thing. So by the time he did come out, he had developed the process, and he also was ready to put it out to the world before he did so. I had the pleasure of meeting with Dr. Michael Newton a few times before he died, and they sent him on a book tour once he wrote his books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. And he was in New York City at a bookstore there. This tells you a little bit about what he was like. It was so hectic, and there were so many people that they decided to use a loudspeaker to project this out into the surrounding area. And so finally at noon, they let him out to have a little lunch. He snuck out the back door and went to one of the food carts that are very common in that area. And he sat down on the edge of a fountain next to another man. The man said to him, "Were you here in time to hear the guru?" He said, "I guess not." He didn't let on who he was. He was very humble, and he continued to be that way through his entire career. He really didn't want much fame, and so it's the process itself that he wanted to put forward. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got into this to begin with. I'm what you would call earlier in my life a hardcore researcher. When I was growing up, I devoured first Clara Barton books. Maybe some of you remember those, because I really wanted to be a nurse. But as I got a little older, I got into some of the research books. I started with Louis Pasteur, and I moved on to others, and I decided I want to be a nurse researcher. Well, at that time, there weren't very many of those, so it was an easy path for me to get into. So I went on straight through nursing school to get my master's and my PhD, and started out working in a university setting in a research role. I continued in that career for quite a while, but there was evidence very early on that I was going to go down a different path later on. The first thing that happened was when I was in my master's program, I needed some extra money to pay for the very expensive tuition at that. And so I took a job on weekends in an emergency room, a very busy one. And one night while I was working, they brought a woman in who'd been in a car accident. She came in what we call DOA, or dead on arrival. We took her immediately back to our major treatment room and started doing resuscitation on her. We worked on her for a period of about 45 minutes, and then she was revived. So I went with her into one of our holding rooms before she would be taken upstairs to be admitted to the hospital. And I was trying to tell her what would be happening next and about what she'd just been through. And she interrupted me and said, "You don't have to tell me a thing. I watched the whole thing. I watched you resuscitate me. I watched this. I watched that." That was amazing how accurate she was. But I thought she must have seen this on TV or in a movie. I really don't believe that she saw us. She got kind of exasperated with me because I kept trying to soothe her rather than sounding like I believed her. And she finally said in exasperation, "You have got a huge runner all the way down the back of your left stocking." Well, I thought, that's ridiculous. I just put on a new pair of these non-run hosiery today. There's no way. And I got called somewhere, went about my business. It wasn't until the end of the shift that one of my coworkers came up behind me and said, "What happened to your left stocking?" I looked back, and it was about an inch and a half wide runner all the way down the back of my stocking. I got chills. From then on, I did what you might call a lot of behind the curtain work. That is, I really didn't let my colleagues know what I was doing, but every time there was a person who was resuscitated successfully, I went to them and asked them what kind of memories they were having. So over the years, I've built up a tremendous repertoire of stories of people who have been successfully resuscitated. So that was my first clue. Later on, I needed CEUs before I finished my PhD program to keep up my RN licensure. And I went to a program given by Dolores Krieger on therapeutic touch. I thought, yeah, we touch a lot. This will be an interesting program to go to. Never would I have believed that it was a touch that you don't actually touch. It was working with energy. I loved the program, and I started using it in my emergency room work. Everybody came to me and said I was the one who could calm anybody down and relieve pain and relieve anxiety. I didn't tell them what I was doing because it wasn't very well accepted in the hospital environment. But I continued to use it, and later on, I took Reiki, became a Reiki master, and then started incorporating it into my faculty practice when I was at the University of Alabama at Birmingham as a director of the Nursing Research Center. When I was there, I started doing energy work for different clinics, started with the AIDS clinic and worked with others. And so this built up to the point where I decided I'm going to early retire and start practicing, which is what I did. I founded Wisdom for Wellness, which is, I started out doing health counseling as well as energy work. But during one of my early energy work sessions, I had a man who had repeated severe back pain, so severe couldn't move, couldn't walk hardly. And he'd been through every medical test known to man, tried all sorts of things. He traveled internationally to try to find a solution, and nothing at all worked. There was one thing he found that worked. He came to me, and when I did therapeutic touch and Reiki on him, he would experience spontaneous remission from it and would it be able to do fine. I went on doing this for a couple of years until one session, in the middle of it, he started talking in a strange voice. And to boil this down, it turns out that he was a knight in medieval times. He'd been in a battle with the jousting sticks. He'd been knocked off his horse, landed on a pile of jagged rocks, which broke his back. He was unable to move. The battle went on. They went on without him, and he was left there to die in agony on that pile of jagged rocks. This had never happened to me before, but I instinctively, as a nurse, realized that that was from the past, and so I did a little intervention to heal that. Amazing to me, but that was the last time he ever had an episode of that back pain. This led me to take past life regression training, which I did in 2007 from Ryan Weiss. And subsequently, I took hypnotherapy and did some work with other types of regression therapy. And that then led me to having experiences during my past life regressions where people passed over into the spiritual realm. I didn't know what to do with this at first, but it reminded me a great deal of the stories that I'd been told by patients who had been successfully resuscitated through the years. This led me to finding Life Between Life hypnotherapy by Dr. Newton. I took that training. The rest is history. I became an LBL practitioner, then became an LBL researcher, and that is where I am today. I have literally thousands of wonderful things to tell about healings that have occurred. But let me tell you a bit more about the Newton Institute. It was founded by Dr. Newton. Initially, he had another Society for Spiritual Regression back in 2002. But in 2005, we became the Newton Institute, and that is what is still going today. It started out with just 50 members, but today we have 200 members worldwide. Over 40,000 Life Between Life sessions have been offered worldwide in 40 different countries, in 20 different languages. One of the amazing things about it is the experiences of all, regardless of ethnicity, culture, so on, religion, the experiences in the spiritual realm and during Life Between Life hypnotherapy are remarkably similar. In 2015, we did a member survey as part of our research activities and learned that the majority of our practitioners are using exactly the same methodology that they learned when they went through the training. Therefore, we feel that we're able to do some very valid research on the process. And at the conference in September, I'm going to be telling you a lot more about that process and some of the research that we'll be doing. But for now, I just want to say if you're interested in learning more about this, you might want to go to some of the books of the Newton Institute. The early one was Journey of Souls. The second one was Destiny of Souls, both written by Dr. Michael Newton. Next, he did a book called Life Between Life Hypnotherapy, which details, to some degree, method that he used in his practice. And the fourth book was Memories of the Afterlife, which is a number of case studies done by Newton Institute members. Dr. Newton made his transition in September of 2016, so he is no longer with us. But the Newton Institute continues on. We're carrying on his legacy. The first book to be published since Dr. Newton has passed is going to be coming out. It's due October 1st, but I'm arguing with the publisher right now to get it ready for the conference in September. The book is entitled Llewellyn's Little Book of Life Between Lives. It's essentially an update that comes after 40,000. Well, at that point, we had 34,000 LBLs that were done. And that is due out October 1. It's ready for pre-order right now at Llewellyn's book site, official site. The book that we're working on right now, I'm actually working on two books right now. The first of these is called Wisdom of Souls. What we've learned through Life Between Life sessions, many people come to us with questions about their personal lives, and we've learned that they're able to obtain wonderful soul wisdom about whatever issue it is they're talking. And we've also found that there are some commonalities between some of the advice that is given. So in Wisdom of Souls, we are taking common life issues such as loss of a loved one, family conflict, violence, and many such common occurrences. And we're presenting cases that show the soul wisdom that has been provided during Life Between Life sessions. This book is due out in early 2020. And the third book I'm working on is called Great Loss, Soul Healing. I mentioned earlier, I think, that I lost my only child, my daughter, last year. And I went through a very difficult time. But my spiritual background and training and my ability to connect with the spirit world brought me a great deal of soul wisdom and comfort. And in this book, I want to share many of the things that I experienced. So I'm going to stop talking now and open it up to any questions or comments you may have.
Sure. And is it possible to heal a past injury that is showing up in this life? If there's a connection, like you mentioned about the man with the back problem in the Middle Ages.
Yes.
So if you get if you found out that someone in a past life had some type of chronic condition, and you find out that they're also experiencing that in this life, where does the healing take place? Here or in the past life? How do you focus it?
Okay, the short answer to that is yes. We've experienced many spontaneous healings through Life Between Lives. I'll be outlining at least one in Wisdom of Souls. There may be others. We're not completely finished with the work yet. But the short answer to that is yes, we can. If in quantum theory and quantum healing, then Earth is a place where we have altered time. Here we have a past, present, and a future so that we can experience learning as we go along. However, the universe, we learn from Life Between Life sessions and from quantum theory, there is no time. All of our lives are taking place at the same time. So when we heal something, a session during this lifetime, we throughout all of our lives through quantum connection.
Just a little question. How far can you go back into past lives? Just the previous past life or past life before that or so on, How far do you go back normally?
The typical client who comes in to see me for a past life regression has experienced between 700 and 1,000 previous lives. It is possible for us to ask, can you describe for us your first incarnation on Earth? So we've gone all the way back to that. If you're familiar with our online journey called Stories of the Afterlife, you'll see that we were able to recover some of Dr. Newton's unpublished cases that we have since published in Stories of the Afterlife. And you'll notice one case in there that's of particular interest from two sisters who lived in the Stone Age. They were given past life regressions separately without talking to each other. They were sister and brother in the past life. They're sisters in this life. They both described the same scene back in the prehistoric times.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'll ask for Astrid. Astrid also has very patchy internet. She's asking, what is the best way to go back in past lives if you can't afford a 6-hour hypno session?
Dr. Brian Wise has some tapes out, some CDs out that go with some of his books. There also are some guided past life regressions online in YouTube. And you might be very successful with those. The reason it is, you don't need a therapist to help you go back into your past lives. You can do it yourself. The reason that going to a therapist is a very good idea is because the therapist can ask questions that bring out information that you know, but you know. And it may not be upfront for you, but if you're asked the question, you'll be able to say something about it. But you can certainly do it on your own. You can look for Brian Weiss's books with the CDs, or you can go on YouTube and find guided meditations that allow you to go into a past life.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, and when you've gone through these past lives, like you say, 700 or whatever, have you ever had an experience when are they all human, or are there any type of alternate past life entities that we are? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, let me say that Earth is not the only place that we as souls incarnate. There are other dimensions. We've even experienced incarnations as animals. So there are many others. We've certainly experienced incarnations in other dimensions that are quite different from Earth. If you've read Dr. Michael Newton's original books, he talks about something he calls a hybrid soul. That is a soul that actually incarnated and spent many lifetimes initially in another dimension, but then decided to come to Earth to try and help Earth during difficult times. So they actually came from a different dimension.
I think there's so much research in that possibility. Is just so fascinating. How we're made up, our souls. That's amazing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not sure everybody understands the difference between past life and LBL. And I know you do both. You do past life regressions and life between lives. So can you explain the distinction between life between lives and the past life for everybody?
That's a very good question, Craig, and I'd be happy to do that. A past life regression tells us where we've been and where we are now. And in a past life regression, I would venture to say that almost 100% of the past life regressions I do relate specifically to issues and challenges that we're facing now. But what we're doing is going back to past lives that our soul has lived before. We are souls having a human experience. They'll never be you. You're the only one. But our soul will incarnate many times, different bodies, different times, different places. That is what a past life regression is. We use past life regression as a stepping stool or a stepping stone, you might say, to going into a life between lives session. In life between lives, we're going to where you live, where you reside, when you're not incarnated on earth. It's the spiritual realm, your soul home. It's where we go when we die, and it's where we come from, back to earth when we're born again. In the spiritual realm, it's a place of beautiful love, harmony, peace, and it's a place where we do a great deal of learning. Learning on earth is a little more harsh, a little harder, maybe includes more emotions, more tragedies, more things that we need to deal with. Life in the spiritual realm is more harmonious, loving, but no less a place of learning.
Bjorg, Eva, you'll have to unmute yourself. I can't seem to unmute you.
Yeah. Hello. I would like to ask a question. After the session, do you try to confirm the information and validate it?
Well, certainly many people like to try to confirm information from past life regressions. But in terms of in terms of life between lives sessions, it is a little more difficult to confirm that type of information, although we have had some confirmations from sessions people have had with mediums. We've also had indirect confirmations in that following the advice that they were given during the life between life session resulted in success. And that has to do with physical problems, emotional problems, as well as spiritual distress.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Dennis and Michelle, you had a question?
No, you're good.
Hi, wonderful presentation. I have a question in relation to the entity that you're contacting via the hypnotic session. You're reaching what we would call like the higher self. It seems like in Dr. Newton's books, in a lot of the cases that the people that he's reaching can switch into different personalities that they've experienced during other incarnations. I'm just curious, have you gotten any research that shows the equivalent of the consensual realities where, there's millions of heavens and the people that are living there are still, within their earthly personality. They haven't migrated into what you would call the spiritual realm where the higher entity is located that, basically encapsulates all the incarnations. Was that clear?
Well, I think I understand. And if I'm off base, you can stop me. But first of all, it certainly is possible that when we die, we don't immediately pass over into the spiritual realm. There are some of us who stay around for a while. And in our sessions, we found people that actually have stayed around as long as for centuries. And so it isn't, we don't always pass over right away. So they can be around.
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm bringing in like some of the astral projection information or the OBEs where they've gone into other areas or zones like in the Monroe Institute and they, where there's groups of like-minded souls that are living together, usually within a certain belief system. And
Yes.
right. And so,
Yes.
it seems like the entities that you're reaching through hypnosis and that Dr. Newton has recorded in his books seem to have migrated from that. I've heard of things called the second death, where there is a transformation from, the more human personality identity into the next level. Would that be accurate in terms of who you're reaching?
Well, I think that who we're reaching in Life Between Life sessions, we do put you in touch with your higher self or your soul. That is true. But during the Life Between Life session, you also will interact with your guides, counsel, higher wise beings, departed loved ones. That's possible to interact with them during a session. And we also have experiences of oneness where we become one with the entire universe. And we also have experiences where a very, very high presence is in our sessions. It's a very profound experience. So there are many of those experiences. I was a little bit concerned being a researcher. We haven't done any actual research on this to answer that part of your question. But I'm a little concerned initially, having read many accounts of people having out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. Not all of them are pleasant. And I was worried that I might have a bad experience when I first started doing this. However, I realized that Dr. Newton was very careful when he developed his process, and we use wording that takes the individual to the highest level and gives them ultimate protection. So we go to a very high level during Life Between Lives sessions, and we're very protected. We bypass some of the lower levels where we might not have such a pleasant experience.
Okay.
I still don't know if I've gotten at what you're asking.
Okay. Peter, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I just had another thought. I wondered if you'd ever been able to contact Dr. Newton for any of your the work that you do with various people. Has he come into their sessions, or have you had a session that where he's appeared and spoken to you or had more information coming through from him?
Well, I think first of all, let me say that we're having a rash of people that we don't know that come not necessarily through LBLs, but from all over the world that are claiming things that they've heard from Dr. Newton or that they're in contact with him. Maybe some of these are accurate, we don't know. But one of the things we've started doing, because sometimes they say they're in contact and they come out with some kind of bizarre things. So what we've started doing is asking them a series of questions that only people who really, only Dr. Newton would know and only a select few of us. And to date, we've never found anybody who could really pass that test. Now, I would say that some of us who are very close to Dr. Newton feel that we've had some experiences with him, but this is something that, as a researcher, I'm not going to put a stamp of approval on.
I understand that, yeah. Yeah, just a wonder, that was all. You don't know what's going to happen when you start linking.
Yes.
Well, you know probably more than what I do, but you know, if he's there, I would have thought that he may have wanted to come back and sort of offer some more advice and make sure that you're doing it in the way that he wanted it done, you know.
Well, I will say this. I was going to write Wisdom of Souls on my own. I had the idea for several years. And it's a matter of I kept collecting cases and I was going to do it. I was at the World Conference this last year, sitting in our advisory committee meeting, and all of a sudden out of my mouth comes, Wisdom of Souls is going to be the next Newton Institute book that we'll all contribute to. And after I said it, I kind of sat back and thought, where did that come from? I still don't know, but I have a hunch. In closing, I'd just like to say that Life Between Life hypnotherapy is a very profound, life-changing experience. Some of the research that we have done is the experience that those people who have a positive near-death experience have. They are very similar experiences. When I visited the University of Virginia Department of Perceptual Studies this last year and had a chance to interact with Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's a premier researcher in past lives, in near-death experiences, I asked him, where did he think people who had near-death experiences went when they had one? And he said, they go where you take people, in LBL. So I think there's a great similarity there. And I think as we do more research on various aspects of the afterlife, that we will learn that we're amassing data. It's like when we touch the elephant, blind people touching the elephant, we're learning different parts. And when we start to put it all together, we're going to learn some amazing, wonderful things. And I also want to say a thank you to Craig for his communication with departed loved ones. It was one of the things that really, really helped me in my healing journey. Michelle, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
I met you at the conference last year.
I know, I remember. I remember. Could you talk a little bit about the certification that you have for, from the Institute?
Yes. To become a Life Between Life therapist, you first need to go through a certified hypnotherapy course. Once you're certified in hypnotherapy, you need to have some experience in being a hypnotherapist. Then you can go on to past life regression from one of the approved providers. And you need to have a certain number of hours. I don't have that on the tip of my tongue, but it's on our website. Number of hours being a past life regressionist. And after you've had that, you can go on to Life Between Lives training, which is a week-long, very intensive training. After that, you must do supervised written cases of Life Between Lives sessions and become certified after that. So it's a lengthy process. It takes a while.
Thank you. Dennis and I were just kind of behind the scenes here talking, and of course he's got his research, a PhD in research psychology, and I looked at him and I said, why haven't you ever done that? So, thank you.
Well, I invite you to do it. That would be great.
And I'm thinking, how can we in AREI bring together some of the different modalities to help this research?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I agree with you. That's exactly what we need to do. All of us who are doing research in the afterlife need to be looking at what our colleagues are doing and seeing how this all fits together. It will probably raise more questions than it answers, but that propels us forward as researchers. I think one example is we can do research that crosses lines. An example of this is we're cooperating right now with Dr. Alito from Canada, who received a small grant to do research. He's a cardiovascular surgeon, and he wants to do research on some of his patients who have had near-death experiences and had to be resuscitated. He wants to find out if those who are confused or had a less than positive experience can be helped through life between life sessions. And so, or even if they've had a positive experience, if they can get more out of it through doing that. That's an example of bringing near-death research and LBL research together. And I think we need to do that in many areas. We need to do some joint research projects where we bring together more than one modality and see how they interface, how the information can propel us forward, and where the gaps in our knowledge are. I think one of the things that we're working against now as a backdrop for all of this, having come out of the academic research field, I know that a great percentage of the population does not even begin to believe in any of this. And so I think the more we can do valid research and bring these things forward, the more progress we're going to make. And yes, we need to bring all of these various sources of information together as we plan what we're going to be doing in the future.
Okay, I have a question for you from Rob, who's having some internet problems. He asks, what have you learned about the future of afterlife contact and studies for Earth? Have clients spoken about the future of this work or what the situation is in the next 100 or 200 years? And then after that, Michelle and Dennis have a question.
Okay, yes, we have received some information on that. And the information we've received is not in the not too distant future. Time is a difficult thing for the spirit world to quantify because there is no time there. So we find that many times what they say about time is not necessarily reliable in Earth where we have the altered time system. But we've been told in the not too distant future in a number of sessions that communication with the afterlife is going to be very natural and that we'll be able to do it on our own by ourselves.
First of all, I just wanted to say that anybody here who has not read Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, thank you. Fabulous, amazing books. We actually use them as sources on afterlife data, and the information in those are just tremendous. And I'm really excited to hear what's going to be in the next book. So if you have not read those, they are so worth reading. They're really amazing, amazing books. And then Dennis had something to say.
Yeah, actually, those books were some of the original sources that we used when we first launched Afterlife Data. We're actually thinking that it's possible to, we have another program called Voices Across the Veil, where we have small group sessions with mediums for people around the world at reasonable cost. And what we were thinking, I know that LBL sessions can be extremely long, but what we're really curious in doing is to actually provide that possibility, and everything gets recorded. But we're also curious in terms of asking questions that will expand our knowledge of the non-physical dimensions. and then also coordinate that with mediums that are also channelers that can bring in higher level entities so that we can then ask the same questions in a very systematic way in order to be able to compare, because that's what we did with afterlife data. And we found a high correlation across among a number of different areas of non-physical reality. And we'd like to actually do it real time now, and maybe have, do it with a channeler, do it with an LBL practitioner, and then with mediums, and be able to compare the results.
Great. That sounds like a wonderful idea, and I would really encourage you. The two of you are doing some very interesting research that really is in the area that Wendy was just talking about, looking at different areas where we're learning about the afterlife. I would encourage you to do that. And I think we need to do more of that. We can do shorter sessions. One of the things we did at our World Conference this last year was we did a shorter version of Life Between Life trance entry for experienced practitioners. We've learned through our sessions that if you ask a younger soul a question versus what you ask an advanced soul, you may get a very different answer. They're not necessarily in conflict, but it's as if you asked a second grader a question and then a PhD. They'd give you a very different answer on the surface because it'd be much more complex. So at our World Conference, we asked during these shorter sessions, we think advanced souls, our practitioners, questions about various things. And one of the things that I'll be talking about at the symposium, and also will be publishing soon, is we ask questions about violence. There's so much violence in our world right now on the personal, community, and the worldwide level. So we asked questions about what the meaning of this violence was, how it affected souls, and we asked a number of other questions. And we found that to be very successful. So shorter sessions, I think, could work, and I think we can do some research of this type.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Made my day.
And many, many parents get very upset at the idea that their child will have already reincarnated once they cross over. Their whole purpose in living is to be reunited with that child. What would you say to those parents?
Okay, one of the things that we've learned through Life Between Life sessions is that when we incarnate, we only bring a portion, a percentage of our energy into the incarnation. A percentage or a portion always stays in the afterlife. And it is possible for those parents to connect with that portion of energy that remained in the afterlife, even if the child has reincarnated.
So nothing is lost in terms of the...
Nothing is lost. And we also have some evidence that even those who have reincarnated at night are on the other side and make contact with loved ones from earlier lives.
So really, we're all parallel lives anyway. All our lives are at the same time. Is that what you've...
That's correct from the quantum theory aspect, yes.
Mm. And is it possible for people to gain wisdom and information and skills by tuning into those parallel lives?
Absolutely, it is. It's very possible, and we sometimes go into these during our sessions. And I do past life regressions a bit differently than the typical practitioner does. I developed this method. When I do a past life regression, whatever life the person goes back into, at the end of that session, let's say they were Johann in a past life where they were in Scandinavia and they were a fisherman. At the end of the session, I would ask to speak directly to Johann, and I would ask Johann, what was it that Johann wanted to tell my client today, or what did Johann want to show them? And typically we get back tremendously relevant information about the client's current life. and we get back wonderful wisdom. I have not totally decided who we're talking to there. If we're talking to Johann from that past life, or if we're talking to the higher self, or if a guide is interceding at this point. However, I've had the experience of some of the past lives being able to give excellent information and others being able to give only limited information. So I'm continuing to work with this and see what comes out.
Thank you. Just one other question. In terms of spiritual development, one of our themes in AREI is looking at new spirituality, which is really old spirituality, but just looking at what is it that emerges from your work in terms of how people can be personally developing their spirituality.
What we find is a person who has experienced a life between life session has a profound experience that changes their life from then on. They'll remember years later exactly what happened, and the way it changes is it gives them a very, very broad perspective of who they are and why they're here on earth. It erases fear of death, and it gives them a much, much greater tolerance for others. It usually does away with blame. It changes the perspective that they have toward others. It increases their capacity to love. It increases their capacity to look forward to the experiences and the learning that they're having here on earth, rather than seeing them as struggles.
Wow. I think they should be compulsory part of.
Could be.
Can you imagine if every student had a life between lives session? Wouldn't this change the world?
Yes.
Okay, Dennis and Michelle, you have a question?
I'm unmuted.
Yes. Go.
Hi, it's me again. You got me really excited now. Have you reached anyone that has been in the equivalent of a future life?
Yes.
Future time period?
Yes.
And what have you, any snippets of information in terms of?
Well, I've had quite a few of those. People sometimes come in and say they want to go to a future life. And since all the lives are occurring at once, that's pretty easy to do. And so I've got a number of cases from that. I'm trying to think of the most recent one I did. One of the most recent ones I did was a woman who came in to have both past life regression and life between life regression. She's given me permission to use her story in my book, so I feel comfortable in sharing this. She was having just a lot of struggles right now, and so she wanted to go not to a past life, but to a future life. So we started out with that in her session, and the first thing that she came out with was, I do not want to come back, and kind of refused to go until I worked with her a bit. But when she got there, what she found was that these challenges that she's experiencing, these difficulties right now, are because she chose to do some very rapid learning, because what she wanted to do in the future was to help people, particularly children. And she saw future lives where she was helping the children in the future that were very, very satisfying to her. So that's one example.
How far in the future was that, chronologically?
It's a little bit hard to say. As I said, time is a difficult thing in the spirit world because they don't have time there. So it seemed like it was around 50 years, but I don't know.
Have you, I'm sorry, one more question. Have you found any type of other probable realities, like people having experienced World War II, where the Germans won, for example, or something that is different from our known history?
Well, I haven't experienced that through LBL, but I do another therapy called quantum consciousness, which was developed by Peter Smith. during quantum consciousness, we do explore alternative realities. And yes, I add some alternative things there.
Oh, okay. It's a lot to learn.
And
Yes.
what, if people asked you, what is the effect on the soul of suicide? We have a lot of people whose children have committed suicide and they are concerned or they're thinking about suicide themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned through?
Yes. What we've learned through LBL is that there's no punishment or anything for suicide. It's not considered bad, but it is cutting short the learning that you have while you're on Earth. Being here on Earth is a very precious learning experience. It's as if we're in school. And so what you did is you dropped out of school early when you commit suicide, and you don't obtain the learning that you might have learned. And that means you'll need to come back. You'll need to do it over again. It's not a thing to be ashamed of or to be punished for or anything like that. It's just maybe a lost opportunity. And they're received back in the spirit world with lots of love and compassion and help to learn there in the spirit world before they come back for their next incarnation.
Joe?
Joe?
Yeah, to follow up on that, I mean, if someone had committed suicide, can it be related to the people around them having a learning experience? Medical people's spiritual lives could change because someone left early. I mean, is it something, like you said, they have to come back into the learning school, but maybe is it possible that they actually were supposed to carry out that particular act so it would affect the growing opportunities of people around them?
That's certainly possible because we do plan things in our lives that will help us learn, and that certainly could be possible. One of the things that I got from one of my sessions that I did with a mother who'd had a child who committed suicide was that it doesn't matter how the person gets there, whether it's through suicide or other means. When the soul has decided it's time to leave, maybe part of the plan to help others learn, maybe part of their own path, that regardless of how they leave, it's okay. So there's nothing negative about it in the spirit world.
Thank you.
And have you got any thoughts on euthanasia? As a nurse, this is something obviously that you've had experience with. Do people choose to have a painful death, or is it something that can just be avoided?
The soul does choose to have experiences as well as learning coming here on Earth. So it could be either. I'm certainly in favor of euthanasia, but I think maybe some souls do want to have a painful death experience. One of the most sobering regressions that I ever experienced was one in which a man had been in a car accident, and we went back to it because he was still having trouble processing it and dealing with it. And during that time, he had a severe head injury that might have resulted in blindness. And when he realized that he might be blind while he was in the hospital recovering from the incident, his soul was saying, "Oh, wonderful. We haven't had this experience before. I hope that's what happens." That's what the soul is saying. Whereas we here on Earth would say, "Oh my goodness, that would be a horrible thing to have happen." After I came out of that session, I was a little shell-shocked, and I thought, well, I guess our soul wants to have certain experiences for the learning that they can provide, and they might not always be what we would consider pleasant experiences while we're here on Earth.
Thank you, Anne. That was wonderful, and we very much enjoyed that. And we have lots more to talk about because there's lots more that we need to be doing with this field. And I wanted to thank you for that and look forward to seeing you in the symposium.
Yes, I look forward to seeing all of you there.
And can you tell us about your workshops at the symposium?
Oh, my workshop, yes. My workshop is entitled A Great Loss, Soul Healing. A great loss is one that can be like an earthquake to your self-concept. It completely shakes up your world. It creates a chasm in your life that never can be crossed. With any type of grieving, we grieve, we experience loss, but with great loss, there is no way we can go back to being the person we were before. My belief is that great loss is a great gift. It's a great gift from spirit that allows us to achieve learning we could achieve in no other way. And it comes to those of us who have gotten a little off kilter, a little off our path. And what it does is if we heal from great loss and if we look it in the face and heal through it, it can bring us to new heights of spiritual growth and learning that we could not have achieved in any other way. I'll be talking about what great loss is, how it affects mind, body, and spirit, and the others in our lives. We'll be doing a mini regression exercise that is designed to let you get in touch with your soul wisdom. And I'm bringing with me some Newton Institute members and some of my friends that are specialized in to help debrief after this experience.